Welcome to our deep dive, everyone. Today we're going to be taking a closer look at poverty in the United States.
Specifically at what the latest data tells us
Yeah, what's going on?
about who's struggling in the U.S.
And
how the way we actually measure poverty
okay, different measures.
can completely change the picture we see.
Yeah, it's like having two different sets of glasses on.
Right, two lenses.
And it's so interesting how even the way we define something like poverty
Yeah,
can have such a huge impact on how we perceive it.
absolutely.
It's like those optical illusions where the same image can look like two totally different things.
It really is, yeah.
So the U.S. Census Bureau just released its Poverty in the United States 2023 report.
Yep.
And we're going to be taking a deep dive into that and comparing the kind of classic official poverty measure with the newer supplemental poverty measure, which everyone calls the SPM.
Right.
So let's start by breaking down those two lenses. The official poverty measure has been around for decades, right?
Yeah, since the 1960s.
Wow.
It's based purely on pre-tax cash income,
Okay.
which gives us a really consistent yardstick for measuring poverty over time.
Right. So consistent across time.
Right, but it's like trying to navigate a city with only a street map.
Okay.
You get the basic layout, the streets,
Yeah, the bare bones.
but you miss all the details
Yeah.
that really shape the experience.
Like all the little side streets and the cool shops.
Exactly.
That's where the SPM comes in.
The SPM comes in and fills in all those missing details.
Yeah.
It's like having a 3D map with all the terrain and landmarks.
Oh, I like that.
It considers things like government assistance, taxes, medical expenses,
Wow.
even the different cost of living across the country.
The different cost of living. Yeah, because that's huge.
So much more insightful.
Yeah, so with the official measure, we see that the poverty rate actually went down in 2023 by 0.4 percentage points to 11.1%.
Yeah, and that's the first noticeable change since 2020.
Okay, so on the surface, that sounds like progress.
Right.
Like things are getting better. But I have a feeling there's more to the story.
You're sharp. There is.
Okay, tell me.
While the rate went down, the total number of people in poverty remains statistically unchanged from 2022.
So the same number of people are in poverty, it's just the percentage
That's right.
shifted a little bit.
And it's a huge number. We're talking 36.8 million people.
Wow.
And the SPM tells a completely different story.
This must be where the two lenses really come into play.
They do.
Okay.
The SPM actually shows an increase in poverty by 0.5 percentage points to 12.9% in 2023.
Okay, so it went up.
It went up, and this isn't a one-off.
Oh, no.
It's the second year in a row that the SPM rate has climbed.
So we've got one measure showing a slight improvement and the other one flashing a warning sign.
Yeah.
I'm guessing for people trying to make policy, this must be really frustrating.
It definitely makes things tricky.
Yeah.
And it gets even more complicated when we start looking at how each measure impacts different groups of people, especially children. The SPM child poverty rate actually jumped by 1.3 percentage points to 13.7%.
Wow. That's significant.
That's significant.
So even though both measures are looking at the same country at the same time,
Right.
they're painting very different pictures.
Yeah.
So let's dig into why these two measures diverge so much.
Okay. Good idea.
Where do we start?
Well, one key difference lies in how they adjust the poverty threshold each year to keep pace with the cost of living.
Makes sense.
The official measure uses the Consumer Price Index, which, is the CPI,
Yeah.
which reflects average price changes for urban consumers across the board.
Okay, so it's kind of like taking the temperature of inflation in general.
Exactly.
But what about the specific costs that really hit low-income families hard?
Yeah.
Like housing.
That's where the SPM's approach is more insightful.
Okay.
Instead of just looking at overall inflation, it uses a 5-year moving average of actual expenditures on a set basket of goods and services. So it captures those real-life price shifts that might be more dramatic in certain regions or for certain types of expenses.
Okay, so it's not just inflation in general.
Yeah.
It's how much those essential things actually cost
Right now.
for families right now.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Does that also explain why there's a bigger difference in the measures for some groups compared to others?
It absolutely does.
Interesting.
And that's where things get really revealing,
Okay.
especially when we look at how government programs impact those numbers.
Oh, yeah, because that's a huge factor.
Huge factor. For example, in 2023, the SPM poverty rates were higher than the official rates for almost everyone except children and cohabiting partners.
Okay, so most groups, SPM is higher,
Higher.
except for kids,
And cohabiting partners.
cohabiting partners. Interesting.
Yeah.
Why is that, I wonder?
Well, remember all those pandemic-era programs like the expanded child tax credit?
Yeah, those were really helpful.
They really helped reduce child poverty. But those programs ended.
Right, they did.
And the SPM captures those policy changes.
Okay.
It shows us their real-world impact.
So we can actually see the effect.
We can see it.
That's so helpful.
So back in 2021, the SPM child poverty rate was a full 10.1 percentage points lower
Wow.
than the official rate,
That's a lot.
largely thanks to those programs.
Ugh.
But as that support phased out,
Mm-hmm.
the gap narrowed dramatically down to just 1.5 percentage points in 2023.
So the SPM gave us almost like a real-time view
It did.
of how effective those policies were.
Very much so.
And now that they're gone, we're seeing the consequences.
Yeah, it highlights the fact that poverty isn't some static condition.
Well,
It's dynamic,
it changed.
constantly shifting in response to policy decisions, to economic forces,
Yeah.
even just to the cost of a gallon of milk.
Yeah, that cost of living phrase.
Yeah.
It's not just an abstract concept anymore. Nope. It's like you said, it has real consequences
Real consequences.
for millions of people.
And that's precisely why we need to look beyond those top-line poverty rates.
Yeah.
And really dig into how different groups are experiencing these economic pressures.
So, are you ready to dive deeper?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's see what this data reveals about different age groups, racial and ethnic communities, and types of families.
Okay,
This is where the SPM's detail becomes really powerful.
I think.
You bet it does.
Okay, well, stay with us as we unpack all these crucial nuances in part 2 of our deep dive.
Don't go anywhere.
So we've been talking about these different ways of measuring poverty
Mm-hmm.
and how they can actually lead to pretty different pictures of what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think some people might be thinking, okay, but what's the big deal?
Right.
Why should I even care about these different poverty measures?
It's a fair question.
Like, does it really change anything?
Well, the thing is, the way we measure poverty doesn't just change how we see the problem.
Okay.
It shapes the solutions we come up with.
Oh, that's a good point.
If we're only looking at the official poverty measure. Yeah.
Which tends to paint a rosier picture.
Right.
We might completely miss the full extent of hardship in the country.
Right. So we're not getting the full picture.
And that could lead to policies that fall short,
Yeah.
leaving millions of people without the help they need.
Okay, so let's get into some real-world examples of how this gap between the official measure and the SPM plays out for different groups.
Sounds good.
Where do we start?
Well, we were just talking about children and how those pandemic-era programs made a huge difference.
Yeah, they really did.
And the SPM data really makes a case for those kinds of targeted policies.
So giving families that extra support through things like the expanded child tax credit
Exactly.
had a really measurable impact on child poverty.
It did.
And then when those programs expired,
Mm-hmm.
the SPM captured that shift,
Right.
showing us that child poverty went right back up.
Yeah, it's compelling evidence.
How policymakers are really serious about tackling child poverty. It seems like it would make sense to look back at those programs and maybe think about reinstating them.
That's a strong argument.
The data seems pretty clear.
It does.
Okay, well, let's shift our focus to another group that the SPM shows is especially vulnerable.
Okay.
Those aged 65 and older.
Seniors.
Yeah. The report shows that in 2023, the SPM poverty rate for seniors was a full 4.4 percentage points higher
Wow.
than the official rate.
That's a big difference.
That is a huge difference.
Yeah, why do you think that is?
I'm guessing it has something to do with the fact that the SPM takes into account medical expenses,
You got it.
which can be a huge burden for people living on a fixed income.
Especially for seniors, yeah.
Yeah, so even if a senior's income technically puts them above the official poverty line,
Uh-huh.
they could be struggling to pay for their health care.
Yeah, and then that would push them into poverty according to the SPM.
Exactly.
And this raises some serious questions about the adequacy of programs for seniors.
Like Medicare.
Like Medicare, are they really doing enough to protect older adults from the financial burden of healthcare?
It seems like we need policies that address not just income, but also the rising cost of healthcare,
Absolutely.
especially for people on fixed budgets.
Couldn't agree more.
And it's not just age that matters.
Right.
We also see huge racial and ethnic disparities.
We do.
When we look through the lens of the SPM,
Yeah.
for example,
Okay.
non-Hispanic white individuals had the lowest SPM poverty rate at 8.8%,
Yeah.
while American Indian and Alaska Native individuals had the highest at 19%.
Wow.
followed by Hispanic individuals at 20.9%.
Those are some serious disparities.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that poverty isn't just about a lack of income.
Yeah.
It's about these really deep systemic inequalities that are built into our society.
We need solutions that go beyond just giving people money.
Like what?
We need to address those broader issues, like access to good education, affordable housing, and job opportunities.
Creating a more level playing field.
Exactly, a level playing field where everyone has a chance to succeed.
Because poverty isn't just about individual circumstances.
No.
It's about the opportunities and resources that are available.
Right. And the SPM helps us see those systemic factors more clearly.
Okay, so we've talked about how the SPM sheds light on the experiences of children, seniors, different racial and ethnic groups.
Yes.
Now let's zoom in on how poverty impacts different family structures.
Okay.
You know, we mentioned earlier that the SPM poverty rate was actually lower for cohabiting partners compared to the official rate.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I'm not sure. Actually, it seemed kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Why would couples living together unmarried fare better under the SPM?
It all comes down to how the two measures define a family unit.
Okay.
The official measure treats cohabiting partners as separate individuals, which can underestimate their resources.
Oh, so it's missing that shared pot of money that they're using.
Right.
But the SPM recognizes that they're functioning as a single economic unit.
Exactly.
And that changes things.
And this raises some interesting policy questions.
Like what?
Should programs that are designed to help families be expanded to include cohabiting couples?
Especially if they have kids.
Especially if they have kids. The SPM data seems to suggest that recognizing their shared resources might be a more accurate reflection of their needs.
Makes you wonder how many other policies might be missing the mark because they're based on these outdated ideas of what a family is.
That's a good point.
Okay, so we've seen how the SPM helps us understand the experiences of all these different groups. What about the impact of work?
Oh, yeah, work is huge.
Does the SPM give us any insights there?
Absolutely. The report found that work experience plays a major role in shaping poverty rates.
Okay, so people who work, obviously, are less likely to be in poverty.
Right. The SPM rate for people working less than full-time year-round was 14.7%.
Okay.
While those working full-time year-round had a rate of 4.1%.
So having that stable full-time job makes a huge difference.
Huge difference.
But there's a catch, right?
There's always a catch.
What is it?
Even people working full-time can struggle to make ends meet.
You mean even with a steady paycheck, they're still right on the edge of poverty?
That's right. It suggests that wages might not be keeping up with the cost of living.
So you've got these families that are working so hard, doing everything right,
Yep.
and they're still barely scraping by.
It really highlights the problem of working poverty.
Yeah.
And it shows that just having a job isn't always enough
to
escape financial hardship.
So what can we do about that?
Well, we need policies that go beyond just creating jobs.
Okay.
We need to focus on things like raising the minimum wage,
Okay.
strengthening worker protections, and making childcare more affordable.
Because if people are working full-time but still can't afford basic necessities, something is definitely wrong.
Something's not working.
And it's not just about individual effort.
Right.
It's about creating an economic system that actually works for working people.
Well said.
And this all brings us back to the importance of the SPM.
Yes.
It gives us a much more detailed and complete picture of poverty.
Compared to the official measure.
Yeah, it's like looking at a high-resolution image.
Yes.
Instead of a blurry one.
We can see the detail.
The little details.
The complexities and how all these factors are connected.
And those details matter.
They do.
Because they can help us create solutions that actually work.
Solutions that are effective and fair.
Now, before we wrap up,
Yeah.
we need to acknowledge that even the SPM has its limits.
Of course, no measure is perfect.
Right. What are some of the things we should keep in mind?
Well, one thing to remember is that both the official measure and the SPM are based on snapshots of income and expenses at a specific point in time.
Like a freeze frame.
Yeah, like a freeze frame of someone's financial situation.
But we know poverty isn't always a permanent condition.
Right. People's lives are constantly changing.
Yeah, things happen.
And those changes can impact their finances.
So someone might have a job loss or a medical emergency or a family crisis.
Right.
That pushes them into poverty.
Even if they're usually doing okay.
Right. So the SPM wouldn't necessarily capture that.
Yeah, it doesn't show us the whole picture.
So these measures are valuable tools. but they don't tell us everything.
We need to remember that.
So what else can we do to get a more complete understanding?
Well, it's important to pair these quantitative data with qualitative research.
Okay.
Talking to people who are experiencing poverty firsthand,
Hearing their stories.
understanding their challenges, learning from their resilience.
Because behind every statistic, there's a person
Right.
with a unique experience.
In a story.
And those stories can help us create policies that are more grounded in empathy and understanding.
Well said.
So that brings us to the end of part 2 of our deep dive.
We're almost there.
But we're not done yet. Stick around for the final part,
Yeah.
where we'll explore some more data points
More data.
and resources that can help us further understand poverty in America.
I've got some good ones.
And we'll leave you with a challenge.
Ooh, a challenge. I like it.
How can we use everything we've learned from both the official poverty measure and the SPM
Okay.
to advocate for policies that create a more just and equitable society?
That's the big question.
It is a big question, but it's the right one.
It is.
Until next time, deep divers. We're back for the final part of our deep dive into poverty in the U.S.
We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We have from the technical stuff about how poverty's measured
Yeah, all those different measures.
to the real-world impact on people.
Real stories.
Yeah, it's been eye-opening.
It has. It's like we've been putting a puzzle together.
Yeah, each piece adding a new layer of understanding.
The official measure, the SPM, those stories we talked about.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of adding layers,
Okay.
I'm ready for more of those fascinating data points.
All right. I've got some good ones.
What else really jumped out at you from the report?
Well, one thing that struck me was the impact of refundable tax credits,
Okay.
specifically on certain age groups.
Okay, yeah, break that down for me.
So the report shows that a full third of all the people lifted out of poverty by these credits
Yeah.
were helped by the refundable portion of the child tax credit.
So a huge chunk of that impact is specifically from the child tax credit.
Yeah. It's not just some abstract policy impact. We're
Yeah.
talking about potentially millions of kids and families
Wow.
whose lives were changed by this one specific part of the tax code.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And it makes you think,
Yeah?
what if we expanded those credits or made them permanent?
Right. What
I'd
kind of
prob-
impact could that have?
Yeah, could we make an even bigger dent in poverty?
It's definitely something to think about, especially when we remember how effective those pandemic expansions were.
For sure.
Okay, well, we've talked a lot about government programs that help people.
Uh-huh.
But what about the things that actually push people into poverty?
Yeah, the flip side.
The things that make it harder?
Right. Well, we keep coming back to medical expenses.
Yeah, for good reason.
And the report really digs into how much of an impact healthcare costs have
On different groups of people.
on different age groups. Yeah.
So give me the numbers. How bad is it?
Okay, so for people 65 and older, subtracting medical expenses from their resources,
Okay.
increased the SPM poverty rate by a whopping 3.8 percentage points.
Wow.
That's more than double the impact for children and working age adults.
Wow. That's a huge difference.
It is, and it makes sense when you think about it.
Yes, seniors are more likely to have health problems.
Chronic conditions.
And they're often on fixed incomes.
Right. So healthcare costs can really hit them hard.
It's a stark reminder that healthcare affordability is a poverty issue.
Especially as our population ages.
Yeah, we're going to have more and more seniors. It
Absolutely.
makes me think about those stories we talked about.
The ones behind the numbers.
Yeah, imagine being a senior who's worked their whole life,
Mm.
and then they have to choose between their medication and food.
It's heartbreaking.
It really is. It shows how urgent it is to find ways to protect older adults from these costs.
I agree.
So we've covered a lot in this deep dive,
A lot of information.
but I know we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah, there's always more to learn.
So for listeners who want to go deeper, what are some good resources?
Well, the best place to start is the report itself.
Poverty in the United States 2023.
That's the one. It's on the U.S. Census Bureau website.
And it's not just some boring technical document, is it?
No way, it's actually packed with information.
Like what kind of stuff?
Well, they have tables and charts breaking down poverty by different groups.
Age raise, all that.
Everything you can think of.
So if someone wants to really understand the challenges different communities face,
The report's the place to go.
okay. And the Census Bureau website has other resources too, right?
Tons. They have stuff on poverty, income,
Yeah.
all sorts of economic indicators,
Wow.
interactive tools, fact sheets, even historical data.
It's amazing how much is out there.
It is.
But as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge.
Okay, I love a good challenge.
It's one thing to understand how poverty is measured,
Right?
but the real work is taking that knowledge and doing something with it.
Turning it into action.
Exactly. So here's the challenge.
I'm listening.
How can we use what we've learned from both the official measure and the SPM to advocate for policies that make a real difference?
To create a more just and equitable society.
Yes, where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
That's the goal.
No matter their income or background.
I think we can get there.
I do too. These are big questions.
They are.
But by having these conversations, looking at the data, listening to people's stories,
we can start finding solutions.
Solutions that actually work.
I believe that.
Me too.
Oh.
Well, that's it for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Until next time.